Hello all, and welcome to a special video. So normally I do song recommending videos when it comes to this kind of content, but this time I thought to talk about my personal ranking of my top 15 albums, and I think it kind of can add to the whole recommending song tradition that I've been doing for quite some time now. But after a while, I remember, thinking to myself, what are my favorite albums? And there you go. I've done, a lot of reflection, and here's my list. However, when it comes to like top tens or so forth, it's it's like setting some ground rules. And I think to be a bit more fair, I'm going to go for like different artists for each one because I feel like if I did do my proper top 15, then I think it would have been made up of the same artists, and I think that will be a bit unfair. It probably would have resulted in a pretty unsatisfying video. But I will still mention the other albums which these artists have done, which I like. So yeah, other than that, let's get on to what my favourite albums are. So firstly, I know this is a very unusual first choice, but yeah, not gonna lie, when I was just scrolling through the songs I like, I remember thinking, you know what, some of the songs I have liked, let's say, yeah, nearly 20 years ago, yeah, this was definitely an album I used to enjoy, especially as some of the songs in this album I still really like to this day. So for those who are unfamiliar with this album, it has songs like The Promise, Loving Kind, um, Untouchable. Yeah, of course, that's my favourite one. I nearly called it Unbreakable, but no, that's the film, which I also like, by the way. But yeah, outside of those three singles, the album tracks, as far as I can remember, are also rather good. I really like Mystery Bow Wow. That's a really good album track. Assuming it's not been made into a single. Sometimes some songs from an album are made singles, even without a music video. Sometimes those are called focus tracks if a non-single track is made popular or at least chosen to be and the next single. Um, and yeah, fun fact there. But yeah, outside of Promise, Love Kind and Untouchable, I don't know what other singles have been made from this album. I almost want to say Rolling Back the River in Time. I think that's what it's called. Yeah, I'm not gonna lie, I haven't listened to the album as a whole in a while. Um, so yeah, it is coming off from old memories aside from the songs I still really like. But I still remember the other songs still. Yeah, I really like the last track, which is the same as no. So, what was it called again? Is it called We Wanna Rock? Something like that. Because I thought it was the name of the album, but it mentions the album's title, which I kind of like as a detail. And fun fact, in their song Love Machine, which is much earlier than this, that song also mentions the its own album's title, which is What Would the Neighbours Say? Which, yeah, I just like Easter eggs like that. It sounds like it's a thing that this band does quite often. Um, but yeah, so I forgot to say. So in terms of how I rank these albums, it's what kind of singles they are, what the rest of the album is like, what the style of it is, and yeah, like a lot of these albums I like because of the particular style they go for. Because not gonna lie, I do have this massive music pet peeve where I listen to a really good song done by one artist, and then when just like listening to the rest of their discography, I just remember thinking they never really gone back to that sound. Like, whilst I really like the whole of Queen, no, I've heard people that say, oh, I wish there was another song like Bohemian Rhapsody, because that song really stands out. There's not really been any other song like that, not just in general, but not really done by Queen outside of a couple of connections, like the guitar solo style and the way the piano is. Like, sure, you can make connections like that, but it definitely is a song of its own. But anyway, none of these, but these albums, they do have this really nice. I guess they just have a nice particular sound and they're stuck with it. And in this case, this is very how do I describe the pop songs in here? I think that I think they're just nice and upbeat, and they also I don't know they I think the songs are just almost gentle. Even in songs like Untouchable, which is a very powerful song, it still feels gentle at the same time. It just feels like really smooth, and I think that's what a lot of these songs are like. And even when there's songs of fast strumming or guitar strumming from place to place, or the synths, yeah, it's just powerful but smooth at the same time. That's the overall I feel like they get from this album. And yeah, and when because the Girls Allows is early material, it's very it's like a product of the time almost. Almost it has like a cheesiness to some of the songs, especially Love Machine. Um, yeah, just very 2000s party songs. But with this one, it feels a bit more mature, which I like, and even what they've done afterwards kind of follows on from it, whilst also sounding different. An example of that is a song they've done called Something New, which was 2011, 2012. I remember liking that one. But anyway, yeah, and I think in the grand scheme of things, must be my favourite girl band album, which I didn't think would be this one. There's a lot of girl band tracks which I like, and just did I say? Just yeah, there's just a lot of bands I like. A lot of good material from all of them, including this band. And yeah, like I said, just a really good solid album with a solid identity, and it has some nostalgia. I've listened to this all the way through a good few times. Granted, I'll need to listen to it again recently, see what else I can get from it. And if you're wondering about the vocal work, yeah, I think all of the girls have their distinct vocals. Definitely some more distinct than others. Um, but yeah, I like them all. They stand out, and yeah, they have their own unique qualities to them. Like for instance, Untouchable, I think really highlights that well. I think that shows off. Is that them? I just really like the role of their vocals in the album, because you have Nicola who starts off nice and gentle, and then who sings like the chorus? I'm not sure. Like no reason why I'm getting a bit puzzled, because the album version and the single version are quite different. Because in the album version, one of them only sings, but in the single version, it's all of them then. Um, and then, but yeah, it's just like I said, it's just the way they've taken turns in that song. It's just really nice to make each member very distinct. And the same can be said with any of their songs, but yeah, as you probably could tell, Untouchable is my favourite Girl Slam track. But yeah, not to mention, yeah, the album cover's rather cool as well. I think it matches the whole party vibe they've established before, whilst showing a mature edge to them as well. Yeah, I really like it. Really good photo. And yeah, anyway, let's go on to the next album. All right, so as you may or may not know, I have quite a varied music taste, and we've just gone from pop of the late 2000s to a relatively recent rock album. Quite heavy, probably oh, like 3 Days Grace heavy. No shrieking, but the drum work and the guitar work is still rather heavy, with only an occasional use of synth and piano. And yeah, this is a one-off album by this band. It's a real shame, because when listening to this album, I was wowed. I really like this one. And yeah, and I remember looking online, and not a lot of people, had. I've seen like one or two negative reviews of it, and yeah, I don't really get it. Granted, there are songs, about four, which I like a lot, and the rest, whilst good, probably didn't grasp me as much as the rest. But once again, it is a really nice rock style, which that is heard throughout this album. How would I describe the rock music here? So, like I said, it's similar to 3 Days Grace, but it has uh, how do you say? It's just like mildly gothic and atmospheric in its own way. Um, yeah, and it's almost the heaviest you can get without being heavy. And interestingly enough, because normally if a song is heavy, then the vocals have to match like the heaviness and the sporadic nature of a heavy metal song. But in this case, all of these, the vocals of the lead singer, they're a lot clearer, which is quite interesting. A lot of people, unfortunately, moan about how they can't understand rock people when they screech in that, and I think that's a tad disingenuous because there's a lot of songs I do like that has shrieking in, and I can still understand. But this the album in particular just goes for a slightly lighter approach, and yeah, so if you're wondering what songs I like from this, so the title track, Not Broken, rather superb. Um, Break These Chains, I say, I forget that does have a bit of screeching in. I kind of forgot that. And I presume a couple of other songs have as well. But yeah, I think Break the Chains have the heaviest. No, it's the heaviest track, I think, of the album. And even then, it still feels more like a pulled punch compared to other songs I've heard. And then Believe I also really like, not to mention my website of guitar tabs that haven't been made until now. It has a tab of that song, which I do recommend. It's a really nice slow strumming one. And I also really like One Step Away. It's a song where it has like a good thrust every now and again, especially when the guitar strumming and the drums, just come every now and again, especially when the song first builds up, and it kind of maintains that, which is extremely cool. Um, but yeah, Believe is that's more of a gentle track, and and the strumming is just so nice as well. It's like a real crystal clear strumming. You could just hear the strings go through it. I really like hearing that song sometimes. Granted, not every guitar strum sounds like going through the strings because depending on what the song is, it often sounds very nice, but sometimes it feels a bit more authentic to actually hear the strings going about with that song. And um, And yeah, so when you say when I mentioned earlier about piano and keyboard work, I do remember bits of it in the Not Broken track, which it helps introduce and the song, and yeah, and um, yeah, as you could tell, I know a lot about the songs I like because I have listened to this album all the way through, but not in a while, but yeah, like I said, I just remember listening to the whole album and just remember having not only a very enjoyable experience, but just quite consistent as well, and especially with the style of music it is. And I also really like. Can I get my? Oh yeah, there you go. I'm not sure if you can see my laser pointer or not. Yeah, so the album cover. So it's quite reminiscent of a 2000s rock album because I remember encountering this album in 2017 where I was really into rock music, whether it was both in the 2000s, throughout the 2010s, or in the year 2017, which really had some good songs up their sleeve. And I don't know which year this was out, but yeah, it just feels like a almost like the 2000s, coming back because when you like listen to most of the songs to do in the 2000s, they cover just like minor themes of moving on or loss or getting over a breakup, and these songs and the whole style of the album, it kind of um, matches. Um, yeah, like when listening to the lyrics, it's just very similar to what I hear in a 2000s rock song. And but yeah, like when looking at the album and even like the title track, I think it's a kind of symbolism where looks broken but actually isn't, and I guess it can represent how people can go through a trauma or anything else that might break them down physically or emotionally, and yeah, and just just like moving on from it or getting used to it, or adapting to it. And it's another element which you can find in 2000s rock music. And yeah, like when looking at this, you can somewhat see how it kind of adds to that trend, and also just making it unique as well, because as this is probably like early 2010s, yeah, it's just a nice new take to it. I really like the logo as well. Yeah, I believe this is like the band's logo. And I tell you what, if any of you in the band are seeing this, I hope you're doing more material. If not, come back and make another album. I think you'll be pleasing the fans of this album, including me. But yeah, I think that's all I can say for this one. So yeah, like I said, a really good rock album, and yeah, one I definitely enjoyed the entirety of. So anyway, yeah, let's go along. All right, so for those who may or may not know, Simon Webb was one of the band members for the boy band Blue, which does have four other famous lads. I don't quite remember them, but in that band, Simon was my favourite member, and they must have seen a lot of potential in him at a point where he gets to do his own stuff. It's not just this album. There are a couple of other things that he's done on his own. But yeah, when I was younger, I remember really enjoying this album. And yeah, similar to other albums, there's a whole heap of tracks I don't quite remember, but once again, I do have favourite ones. And yeah, and just how they have this very nice style where a lot of the music is gentle. There's some grand elements. There's also some interesting cases of, because they don't there's not really backing vocalists. They kind of sound like audio snippets of older songs that have come in. Because I swear, like the song snippets that are used feel pre-established, but they are placed in there. And so when you listen to songs like uh, "Lay Your Hands" or "No Worries," they have, yeah, like some kind of older female vocals, and I say older as if coming from the 50s and 60s that come in. And yeah, it's some, yeah, really interesting stuff, and I can think of a couple of other examples of that in the songs I don't quite remember. There's, yeah, just a third one which is going in my memory somewhere. And yeah, there's some orchestral elements in there which is also really interesting, because when a member of a boy band goes solo, it's unpredictable, and I think in most cases it often kind of creates a underwhelming experience, because sometimes they don't know where their footing quite is after leaving the band they come from. But with Simon Webb, not only does he kind of work with elements that we're kind of familiar with Blue, because their songs is often quite laid back, but he introduces some really cool elements, like the additional orchestra and other interesting highlights, such as there's some really cool guitar work, especially in After All This Time and A Little High. I really like um, those elements of those tracks. And um, yeah, this album it's just a nice, gentle, feel good album throughout. It's yeah, and even Simon's vocals, they do have range, but sometimes with an artist's vocals, can either be high or low at certain times, or able to have long vocals, or they do something else of unique moments in between. But yeah, but it's just that yes, I'm just just uses nice soft vocals throughout the songs, especially in times when they get more grand. He does go along with that by making his vocals a tad stronger. And in fact, actually, I remember on the Later Hands there's this really nice moment where he puts on a longer note, and that goes well with the finality of that song in particular. And I think Later Hands might be my favourite track from him and the favourite track from this album. Um, it is a really nice one, and that one also has the orchestral elements which are really nice. There's Time of Your Life that I think that's what it was called, where it's nice and nice and jovial, and I think the album also has minor summary elements to it, just the kind of songs you would hear when the sun is shining. At least it has that kind of vibe which I like. Because I think most of the songs are just either I think all of them. I think sorry, I'm stuttering. In most of these songs are just a subtle type of. It's like a subtle type of romance that's hinted in all of these songs, and most of them just sound mostly upbeat and and gentle at the same time. And it's just a very interesting mix. You will see what I mean when you listen to this album. And um, so not normally the biggest fan of a band member's going solo, but sometimes when a single member from a band, has an idea for what to do on their own, this album is definitely a good example of that. Probably it could be the best example, especially if this is the only time this happens on this list. But I can think of other examples as well, like for instance, when the album members do their own stuff, that has paid off, and other occasions I could think of. Just a really nice chill album. If you, like I said, if you like songs pop songs with orchestral elements, with some unique parts to it, like reused vocals of older songs, and with an occasional acoustic guitar every now and again. I definitely would recommend this album. He's rather cool. I do like the band Blue as well. All Rise is quite a neat track, and which Simon does well in alongside the others. I just wonder about the popularity of this album, because I think Blue were quite popular, but I wonder if this album has like a similar level of success. I really hope so. If not, me and you lot could help bring this album to a new golden age alongside the other albums. Yeah, who knows? But anyway, let's move on to the next album. Yeah, I certainly have not forgotten the first day I first listened to this album. It was during my GCSE era, and it was one of those days where, because I used to revise nearly daily so I can get used to it and to be more prepared, but then I was just one day playing video games, and then I was into rock music, especially in the 2000s, and I was also very interested to see what the 2000s achieved in rock music so far, especially in 2017, which has a whole slew of their own rock material. Linkin Park and Papa Roach, they were releasing new stuff, which was rather cool. But then I encountered this band and this album, and I was really impressed. Like other albums, especially from this early on in the list, I don't remember every track, but there's a good load, and the ones I do like are fantastic. There's the other albums I like, which is it the Just Like You album or the Everything I Hate About You album? Like, because those two tracks are on that album that looks like a painting that definitely came before this album, whatever that was. I did like that one, and then there's a couple of the later ones, such as the what was oh god there's the Black and White one with the hint of pink. That one has the song Somebody Cares About You. I really like that album and that track. And then the album that has the song High Road, which I also like, that too also has the album that has a couple of highlights. But I think this one has attached to me the most, because there was just song by song, and I was like, I really like them. I want to listen to them again, because there's the favourites like High Road to Somebody Cares About You, and Especially Just Like You. That one's a proper um, song that keeps whacking the drums and the guitars at the good time and all in sync, and it just keeps up the speed. It's fab, and I really like the build up to the chorus as well. But what does this album have? So far as I know, I think it has Riot, I think it has Pain, and then there's the other ones alike, such as Gone Forever, Time of Dying, um, Let It Die, and Over and Over, and oh my goodness, what was that other one I really like with the acoustic guitar? I have to normally I didn't want to have to look at the names of these things, but I just had to. And It's Never Too Late. That's it. That also comes on this album. As I was saying, I didn't want to quickly remind myself of names because it would further disrupt the pace of this video, but I had to this time. And that's how much the song was worth it. Yes, Never Too Late. Really good. Really like the acoustic guitar in that one. So yeah, 3 Days Grace, they're definitely one of those bands which is not only Marley heavy, because the lead vocalist, which is he called Adam? I don't quite remember, but he has a nice gruff voice at a point where sometimes when he takes long notes, they almost sound like screeching, but it's actually just his vocals being stronger at points, which is a really nice touch across the albums that they've made. And another interesting thing about this band is that they don't do guitar solos. They normally strum. If not, they have occasional note moments, which can be seen in Never Too Late and Over and Over. And and the likes of the drum work is a bit heavier as well, and also the themes are a bit more mature as well, which it's very cool. Yeah, a lot of this album has the theme of like breaking up and losing someone, trying to get over it, which is a bit of a trend which I kind of saw when listening to a good majority of the 2000s music, and I think this album is quite a good representation of that, especially being a bit more mature and darker as well, because there's a lot of rock tracks which used to kind of take the rip out the idea of breaking up with someone, but I kind of prefer more mature approach, especially and with the songs this has. So talking about the songs more specifically, Over and Over at one point was one of my favorite songs, and yeah, just that one's really good. I think that one even has an orchestra which comes in the bridge and the final chorus. It comes in to add a bit more weight to it, and yeah, I really like the way it's structured, and really like the guitar moments, and also just suddenly remember the orchestra actually vaguely comes in, especially at the start, and then it's like, hey, we're going to come in at full force, and yeah, it's a very fantastic track. And then Never Too Late has an acoustic guitar mainly, and I really like the lead vocalist is, when he, has like the vocals at full power, yeah, they're just absolutely fantastic. They make the lyrics sound so much better. And then and Let It Die is their third favourite, where because in the verse it goes between less rough vocals, and then it goes into rough vocals. It kind of goes in and out like that, and yeah, it's I really like that exchange. It almost sounds like singers taking in turns, but no, it's the same guy, and he has that really nice distinct rock voice. And I don't remember much in the music videos, but they match the songs well. They're very like any other 2000s rock music video, and which I've encountered. And quite an interesting album cover as well. Can be interpreted in many ways, and I kind of like the logos too. Yeah, wow. But yeah, so this is definitely I think, as far as I can remember on the list, I think this is one of my favorite rock albums simply because of the number of songs I like on it. But there's a whole heap of other stuff in the 2000s I like, such as Papa Roach, Sum 41, Avenged Sevenfold. Um, Oh yeah, there's just a whole heap of others which I used to really enjoy. Well, not just the artists on the songs, but albums too. But like I said, this one I really like the journey of, and really enjoyed listening to the entirety of, especially even if I can't quite remember the rest of the songs. But yeah, if you really like the kind of rock songs that are deep and kind of give you that reflection after a rough time. Yeah, this album is definitely for you, and I definitely would recommend the rest of the 2000s rock music as well. Because after listening to pop so long, just going into this genre for the first time, it was great. I just feel like I was growing up in the noughties. Why did I not listen to this? I think one reason is because, like I said, this albums like these are a bit more mature, but even then, I can't, actually no, I don't wish that I listened to it earlier because they came at a really good time. The songs were fresh at a point where everything was getting kind of tricky. So yeah, um, yeah, very very good rock album, and I think this might be the heaviest rock album on this list. I think. But yeah, anyway, let's move on to the next album. Right, so funny story. One of my acquaintances thought that the Bangles were a proper girl band instead of a band that plays instruments, but I'm not listening, by the way. I just think it's an amusing detail because it just depends what you've seen of this band. But yeah, they do play drums and guitars, and yeah, they do very good at it. Because there's another band called Clout back in the 70s that were similar to them, and despite only making one album, yeah, they've done well. And who else? There's Joan Jett who plays guitar. Yeah, I can't really think of any other bands that are similar to Bangles at the moment, but regardless, yeah, the Bangles are definitely a good band, and yeah, this is yet another greatest hits album. And as far as I know, I think this one's in chronological order. I might be wrong. The reason I say that is because their last track, "I'll Set You Free," was what they said was the last track they've ever made together. I think some of them continued on to other things, and a couple of them have worked together, a couple of times after, and they've also been live once more at one point, which is really nice for the fans. But yeah, this is definitely another album where it's one of those albums where it was a childhood album, and then I listened it again during my GCSE era, and I was like, oh wow, I can't believe how much I used to really like this album. I sadly don't remember every track in this one, but I do definitely remember the ones I like because Manic Monday and Eternal Flame and Even Walk Like Egyptian, those three are bangers. And then there's the other lot I like where it's where were you and Everything I Wanted and I'll Set You Free, which I think are fab as well. Everything I Wanted, by the way, is also a brand new guitar tab which me and my colleague have made, and yeah, that's on the internet if you're wondering. Because yeah, Everything I Wanted is definitely a fab rock track. I tell you what, they're also I think they're similar to the likes of Tapao and Roxette, where they have more of a distinct guitar sound, as if you can hear the strings clearly, and there's solos every now and again as well, which is rather interesting. I think that's what I would say about Everything I Wanted. But there's a lot of other tracks which share that element. But at the same time, you have other tracks which properly stand out, like Walking Like an Egyptian. It's one of those tracks where it's it's quite cultural, and they get hold of sounds and instruments which they hardly ever use. And then there's also Manic Monday, which is a bit more piano focus. and yeah, just a bit more of a gentle tune. And not to mention, Eternal Flame is more of a synth heavy track, if not maybe using an orchestra. And yeah, and if you're wondering about the vocal approach, I think they do take turns of vocals, although I think it's the brunette one there who often takes lead. Yeah, they all have really nice, sweet voices. So yeah, I think like any other greatest hits album, you can see the progression. But like I said, as I don't remember the other songs as much, even despite a recent re-listen, just seeing the order of the songs, I think it is still, yeah, it's just it's always very nice to see what a band was like over the years, and yeah, and I think what makes this band stand out, it's the vocals and their occasional experimentation with Walking Like an Egyptian, and also just being an all-girl rock band. That's something that's quite unique, and yeah, so I think to talk more about the songs, yeah, as well as like the three singles you know very well. There's Where Are You, that has a nice gentle guitar, and it also has quite a nice thumping drum in the chorus, which is a nice touch. Like it when they do that sometimes. And then yeah, like I said, Everything I Wanted is a very yeah, that's a proper rock tune, with a solo in. And I also like the progression of that song as well, because the first two choruses play out as normal, but then in the final chorus, as they keep repeating it, there's some nice harmonies in the background and of an additional voice elements, which it's just a really nice way to end the song, and it makes it a tad more emotional as well, because this song is already achieving well with the note choices and the weight, but to then go a step further like that, I'm just like, wow, yeah, very nice. But yeah, I'll Set You Free. Yeah, definitely one of the, just some, a lot of people like me, when you think of the last track of a band, you would normally like it to sound a bit more like an anthem. And yeah, this is definitely the case there. It just feels like a nice combination. I really like yeah, the song starts off with a nice thumping drum, and that kind of carries out throughout. And then the synths does very well. I really like everyone's. It's the lead vocalist. Many, she sings the majority of the song as opposed to taking turns. But the backing vocalist will definitely do well. Well, especially at the end of the song when yeah, they just once again just added progression, especially in the latter half of the song. And yeah, it's just yeah, very cool tune. And interestingly enough, I'm one of those people where I'm very when I find a new song I like, like using it sparingly instead of playing it again until the it touches me. No, I can't really say that. You know what I mean. You can't when you keep listening to a song, the attachment kind of goes. There's a subconscious part in your head that's telling you, yes, I'm fed up. I can predict everything until you learn new elements of the song, or even when someone does a cover, it gains kind of gains the interest back. But most importantly, the song will always have nostalgia for you. So after a good break from a song, it will come back to you, a lot of it, which it is always a nice feeling to have. That's happened to me loads of times. But the reason I say this is because I'll Set You Free has a lot of, because of the way it's written. Yeah, there was just a time where I was just listening to the song every now and again. I was like, wow, I'm not fed up with this at all. It's really, yeah, it's just a very strong song, especially if it has that kind of effect. It kind of reminds me of an ABBA song where a lot of people would have heard the songs loads of times, but it still holds up well for them because of the way it's written. There's just so much effort put into them at a point where yeah, it's just always interesting to listen every time, and yeah, that's what I get with the last track from this band. Um, but anyway, yeah, so the album as a whole, it's really cool. It really shows off this band well. I definitely recommend it if you like likely rocky, stuff from the 80s, throughout the 80s, I would say, unless they were more of a latter half of the 80s kind of band. Because yeah, that was where they were coming from, especially with songs like Eternal Flame and Walk on Egyptian. They were definitely 1986, I believe. Um, so yeah, just yeah, really cool band overall. And I'll say one more thing. The music video for Everything I Wanted, it has a Boston poster on, and I think it's a poster of the most famous album with More Than a Feeling on, which is a funny detail me and my acquaintance found out. So yeah, they might have been influenced by them, or at least fans of them, which is cool because I really like Boston, the band. But anyway, yeah, let's get into the next album. Alright, so this is definitely one of those albums that when I think of my childhood, what regarding what I used to listen to, this is definitely one of the first albums I think of. So this was released, I think 2006 or 7, and yeah, definitely one of those albums which I used to listen to a lot, especially when going out about to places. And yeah, this is just a really cool album and a really cool artist as well. Like I say, I just noticed the top left here is meant to say Mika, not Mike. Um, and yeah, so to jog your memory a bit, he's done tracks like Grace Kelly, Lollipop, and most famously, actually, no, I've mentioned one more. There's Love Today, which you might remember is a nice jammy track, and then there's Happy Ending, which has a very iconic not only a very iconic piano, but the backing vocals as well when they come into the chorus. When you listen to it, you'll know what I mean. And the piano work is often used as an instrumental on TV when an emotional moment is happening in a reality show. Yeah, that song was often used a lot then. But yeah, this is definitely a special album. It has, as a 2000s album, it's nice familiar pop that I think all ages can listen to, but it has a like a quirky edge to it a lot of the time, which is yeah, rather interesting because not only does Mika have a quite a varied voice, but there's an occasional um, there are like there are people who sometimes state lines in between, like for instance in Grace Kelly you do have a small narrator every now and again, which makes that song stand out. But also there's these small interludes where they come at the end or the beginning of songs to emphasize a narrative and theme. Like granted, I can't quite remember, and I think it's a way to connect the tracks. Because I say normally interludes is normally a track in itself, especially when going through a CD on the stereo. But in this case, yeah, it is either at the start or the beginning of songs. Yeah, once again, it is yeah, quite an interesting touch. I'm not normally the biggest fan of interludes, whether it's a quick instrumental or a narration, and I remember that one unique case in Depeche Mode's Violator, where after playing "Enjoy the Silence," the lead vocalist Dave Gahan then says "Enjoy the silence," and then it does become silent for a bit after he gently goes "shh," which is quite interesting. So I remember liking that because it's just a bit more subtle, and then in that way you can kind of choose to move on to the next track. But with interludes, I kind of feel like they're a small interruption when they are sometimes meant to connect. But that is more of a me thing, and the other thing can be said in this album where I'm kind of mixed, but I think it's still a nice touch. And yeah, and this the album front cover here, it's definitely reflective of the kind of music it plays. And also some if this something else I used to do is that I really used to like going through um, because the front cover of an album sometimes has like a mini catalogue, that either has lyrics or photos or even colour illustrations. And yeah, when browsing through the booklet for this one, yeah, it is quite varied in that regard. And yeah, it's just a really nice mixture of quick songs and fast songs, and some of the songs are quite summery, especially in Love Today, especially in its music video as well. And speaking of which, I do quite like the music videos for the singles, especially Happy Ending has that iconic one where Mika continues to, um, you know, even go up to space, and it just, emphasizes that deep feel that that song is able to achieve. And yeah, I don't think there's as much electronic elements compared to other songs. There's a lot of piano work, some nice guitaring, and the piano work I think here is definitely one of the highlights, because you have My Interpretation, which has it nice and slow and steady. You have Happy Ending, where it's extra slow and quiet, and then you have Stuck in the Middle and Ring Ring, which has jammy piano in it. And also, yeah, I have said Ring Ring. It is the same title song as ABBA's Ring Ring. Same title, but not a cover. Both are completely different tracks. And this sort of album also has a secret song as well at the end called Over Your Shoulder. It's not listed when you have a look at the back of the CD, which that I like. I like when it has secret songs, especially when it doesn't label them, because it has a bit of a surprise. Some people might find it misleading, but I don't know. I feel like it's a bit of an Easter egg. And Over Your Shoulder is a extra quiet song. It kind of reminds me of ABBA's Ode to Freedom, where it feels like a song almost sung by a choir, and it's extra gentle and extra atmospheric compared to the pop adventure you just been on to. And yeah, the variations are rather cool. Grace Kelly is kind of jazzy, especially with the bass. You have Lollipop, which has children vocals intermixing, and yeah, My Interpretation sounds quite familiar to other tracks where, despite the piano being at the forefront, it still has like the drums and the guitar to add extra strength to it. And then you have oh, there's Billy Brown, which it kind of gives me country vibes because it tells more of a clear story. Like, it's not a country song, but it just reminds me of a country one, because sometimes in a country song you have like I said, the lyrics that tell more of a story compared to a normal song lyrics, which just have more of a meaning for you to find. But yeah, I was just also just trying to remember what one of the tracks were, which was a bit more atmospheric. But yeah, you get the idea. Once again, um, the songs, Happy Ending, My Interpretation. I think those are my most favourite ones. But even I really like Grace Kelly, Lollipop, and Love Today. Those are fab. I also like Stuck in the Middle as well. That one's also quite interesting. And yeah, those are the songs I favour. But I like the album throughout. I know the the songs in order, and yeah, each one's really distinct as well. And yeah, and when I listen to this album, I've kind of wished Mika has done more. Like, he has done more, but he hasn't done as many albums compared to an average artist, because he's one of those people who often likes to help with other people. Like, for instance, I want to say that he helped create the last Boyzone track, the what was it called? Gave It All Away, which was a tribute to one of the band members that sadly died. I swear Mika did some of the songwriting for that one, and he did for other artists as well. But more recently, he's done a couple more albums. I also really like the songs Tada and No Place in Heaven. Those two are really cool, especially with Tada having some more synth elements, which I never really heard in a Mika album. But yeah, No Place in Heaven just goes back to that nice piano in the forefront kind of approach to a song, which is rather cool. And after this album, Life in Cartoon Motion, there was another album called The Boy Who Knew Too Much, which came after, and it attempts to carry on the style of the quirky, adventurous kind of pop, especially with the visuals being drawn. And yeah, it feels very it's just something that comes out of your childhood almost. It's just very representative of your childhood. And despite, like I said, the second album carries that over. but I think the first one does that better, especially as the second album. There's not as many tracks I like, and there's not many I remember actually, because what I will say is that the following album has the single "We Are Golden," which is definitely another favourite Mika track, also like one of his best. Yeah, that one's a bit more rocky, and you'll probably remember it when you listen to it again. But yeah, that one is just once it gets you, you just can't stop listening to it. It's great, and yeah, with some backing vocalists in there too, adds to the depth and the energy of that track. But yeah, in the following album, there's Blame It on the Boys and the Girls, and there's Blue Eyes, and yeah, I think that's all I can remember. I'll need to listen to the second album again to give it more of a fair shake. But what I will say is that as what I think is Mika's first album, he definitely did well on, very early on in his career. Really glad this album exists, and yeah, I just really like how it stands out compared to other pop albums in the 2000s, especially in the mid 2000s. So yeah, oh yeah, just suddenly realise, and a bonus track. I suppose that's the Easter egg for the last track. I just suddenly remembered. Sorry about that. I don't know where that came from. If you heard the ding. Um, oh yeah, one more thing to mention. Based on the booklet, there are like some drawn elements which are representative of each track. Like for instance, this is representing Lollipop and this is representing Billy Brown. Don't really know what else it represents. This could represent Happy Ending with the piano, but I could be wrong. Um, so yeah, I really like that detail too. But anyway, yeah, let's move on to the next album. All right, so presumably the only uh, boy band album on this list. And despite liking other albums like Beautiful World in Progress, and there's a couple of snippets of tracks I like, like The Back for Good, which I would say is their best 90s track. And but yeah, the reason I've gone for this one is because um, when listening to an album as a whole, that this one does have the most consistency. I think, not gonna lie, I think it was a struggle between choosing this one and Beautiful World, because Beautiful World does have its proper good tracks like Patience, Shine, and I really like Butterfly as well, definitely an emotional track. But with The Circus, there's a bit more memorability. I can definitely tell which track is which, um, and yeah, I like the feel of it more because it's a bit summery, and it's quite a 2000s album where because a lot of the 2000s um, kind of comes back to the nice balance between um, quiet music or dance tunes, the use of either electronic or um, acoustic material. And yeah, this album definitely mixes them well because you have the piano work from The Garden and you have nice acoustic strums on Greatest Day, and yeah, there's both the piano and the acoustic guitar does very well in other songs as well. Like the last song is called Here, which is quite a build up of a track because it starts off nice and gentle with the acoustic guitar, and then I think it adds an orchestra to add like a proper grand feel. And I'm just like, wow, what a way to end the album. And then there's the song Hello, which has a very upbeat, jammy piano, and then you have the song that shares the same name as this album, and yeah, it's a very gentle tune. It also has Said It All, which I also like. Yeah, with both the piano work and also the shared vocals as well. I do like the vocals of all of them, and this album I think does vary um, this vocal stuff the most because of course Gary is the lead in most of them, but you have Mark leading a couple of songs and also coming in later on in tracks, and even here I think is sung by either Harold or Jason. Um, but yeah, just I just like that element of taking in turns because sometimes it bothers me when in a boy band or a girl band they have the favourites which they put up in the forefront more than others. But yeah, I think it is just better to share the spotlight sometimes, even if some people prefer to be in the lead or prefer to be a backing vocalist or Yeah, just wherever, like that's understandable. But like I said, I think it is just nice to hear different vocals, especially when it comes to some of my other favourite songs from many other artists, where yeah, there's an exchange of vocals, and yeah, it helps the variation of the song very nicely sometimes. And yeah, whether this album sticks to one lead or multiple of them, yeah, the songs do really well. And not to mention, you might have heard of a song called Hold Up a Light. I feel like that's a song that's been played on TV a lot, like one of those songs they play because something special is about to happen or something is building up. You would definitely have heard the string work in this album. And yeah, like thinking back of it, thinking back on it rather, yeah, they have an orchestra that comes in and out of this album, and yeah, it just adds to a sense of scale on this album. Yeah, it's rather interesting, rather cool. So yeah, and even going from one track to the next, it often switches between slow tracks and fast tracks, which can, I think that's just quite refreshing, because sometimes we have to listen to a fast track. It depends how you feel. Sometimes it can be exhausted to listen to a streak of fast tracks only to then go to a slow one. But if you just go back and forward, it yeah, just creates a nice balance. And yeah, I do like the order of the songs as well. Yeah, I remember which songs come after another, but yeah, just as far as I can remember how they are placed, yeah, it's yeah, I think it's just a another nice part of this album. And but yeah, as an album that I used to listen to during my holidays back then, like me and my family, we were listening to this album in full, more so in a way after this, because I remember listening to this as a whole in 2013 and 14, despite being a 2006 or 7 album. And yeah, it just does have an adventurous summer feel occasionally, and also a couple of reflective stuff as well, which yeah, like really, yeah, I guess you could say that this album really works as a holiday album if you're going out and about somewhere. And uh, um, yeah, I think I've to word to this one. So yeah, just another nice album, definitely a highlight for this band. Um, um, yeah, I'll stop stuttering, and yeah, I guess we'll get on to the next one. So, believe it or not, this is yet another greatest hits album, but instead of being called Duran Duran Greatest Hits, it's called Decade, which is a cool title because it represents it's pretty much what they were like from start to finish of the 80s. Despite it mainly starts in 81 to 88, or is it actually 89? I don't quite remember. Um, but yeah, like that's being a bit picky if just saying, oh, would have actually been 9 years. So, but like regardless, the word decade, of course, just means um, their time during the 80s, which yeah, a lot of people would say is their golden age, which I definitely would agree. Because when after being a fan of this album, I then went back to them to listen to the rest of their stuff, and despite liking a lot of the songs that came afterwards, especially uh, oh, is it? Oh, yes, as well as Come On Done, there's Ordinary World, which is almost like their form, like going back to glory kind of tracks, which is definitely warranted. I like them too. And there's another track which is fab called Pop Trash Movie, come from the Pop Trash album. And yeah, I really like that one as well. It just sounds like a more modern Duran Duran, and it's new, but it carries on a couple of elements from what they used to be like. So yeah, really good. But anyway, let's focus on their time during the 80s. So yeah, there are listen to some of their albums individually, which is I forgot the name of the first album, but of course Rio is good. The Rio is definitely a good example of another 80s album that's quite consistent in its style. It's very tropical and summery, hence the title Rio. And then Notorious is quite cool. It's that's that has like more edgy elements, and despite losing a couple of their band members, they still continue to be strong. And not to mention 1986, I've heard was the year where a lot of 80s artists, like from the beginning, kind of become less trendy, and so the latter half of the 80s is where a whole heap of new artists came about. I remember watching, um, I think it was like Top of the Pops, they used to say that. But despite, for those who were cool back then, the early 80s, such as this band, I think the likes of Notorious and, well, the track and the album, alongside whatever they've done in the later 80s, yeah, I think that it's all still rather good stuff. And yeah, I think if going for an individual album, I probably would say Rio, which I think was the most successful album anyway, because Rio, Saber Prayer, and Hungry Like the Wolf are some of their most successful songs and their most signature tracks. Yeah, that's the word I was trying to go for. But similar to other greatest hits albums that I like, especially for those that go in a chronological order, there is an interesting um, sense of progression which they have. There are albums where I can see a more of a distinct progression, going for slightly different genres, because despite sticking to the main one. With this band, however, up until Notorious, a lot of um, actually no, I can't say that. I think yeah, there is some distinction, but because of what the drum work was like, and a lot of the guitar strumming is fairly light, with the synth often being more of the lead compared to the guitar work. That's what kind of always been the case with Dran, which I like. And yeah, because certain bands prioritize certain instruments more than others, or prioritize vocal work more so than others. And even Simon Le Bon's vocals, yeah, that's the lead singer. He feels a lot like a forefront singer compared to other bands I listen to, where despite a lot of, I think, yeah, like depending what band you listen to, there are like vocal work which is either more in the forefront and is often more expressive, or they're more in line with the music and often go for more simpler vocals in order to make the instrumental element stand out. But in Dran Dran, I feel like that's more in the middle, and there's a good balance, and there are definitely some tracks where Simon Le Bon's more um, expressive of his vocals, and then there's other times where he kind of lets the music speak, which yeah, depending on which songs, yeah, they do go really well. Yeah, because yeah, I think Hungry Like the Wolf, I would say, is an example of um, where all of it's quite equal, and then you have Wild Boys, which is a quite a vocal heavy track with an occasional percussion, and well, actually no, the percussion's actually rather common. It's the guitar parts which are used more sparingly, which yeah, makes that a really interesting approach. And yeah, Wild Boys is definitely one that stands out. Definitely a very exotic track. Yeah, very tribal as well. Yeah, just really, yeah, really cool. Because yeah, that was in its own album, and yeah, I was trying to remember if they ever experimented more with that style of music. I think they would have done throughout their career and on that album, but yeah, it's just when you listen to the album as a whole, you can definitely see why that one stands out, because I think that was that their only 1984 single? I don't quite remember. Um, but yeah, so yeah, once again, just some interesting progression, and yeah, it's yeah, just struggling what else to say. If you want like yeah, early 80s, I think it's the earlier stuff which I kind of like more so than the latter stuff. Like granted, Notorious is definitely one of my favorite Dran tracks, but even then, I do enjoy like the first two halves of this album more, if not probably like the middle, because I do really like Planet Earth, and Girls on Film is a cool track in itself. I mean, I like the guitar work in that one. But yeah, I think I just like the middle portion. because yeah, that's where a lot of the songs feel a bit stronger, like Hungry Like the Wolf, Is There Something I Should Know, and The Reflex, that has more weight to them, and yeah, a bit more of an emphasis on that. But yeah, it's just yeah, just nice light rock, and in terms, because normally when you think of an 80s rock band, you would think of bands like Def Leppard or Scorpion, where the guitars are proper thrashing and loud, and but yeah, with Duran Duran, there are definitely more of a, they go for a more pop approach, hence why the synth is almost like more of the star compared to the guitar work. And not to mention the bass is also very interesting as well, because the 80s is where they started trying to get more ideas for um, how to use the bass guitar in other varying ways. And Duran Duran does a lot of those really well. I really like the bass in Save a Prayer as well. Not to mention this is one of the only bands where there was one point where I knew the name of everyone, but yeah, not gonna lie, there's been cases where I already know the name of the lead singer, but in this case, yeah, I do know the majority of the names. So yeah, Nick Rose is the keyboard player, John Taylor's the bass, and is Adam Taylor the drummer, and is that the same name as the Queen drummer? It was something like that. Um, Anyway, and oh yeah, speaking of the drumming, if you want to hear a song that's a really good drum, speaking of Rio, yeah, Hold Back the Rain, great drum work. Like the drum really is the star of that song. And not only is it very thumping before the chorus comes along, but in the final chorus, it just keeps on going. And I'm just like, oh wow, that is like some of the best drum work ever. Because, yeah, yeah, I think that's all I can say for this one. So yeah, if you like rock bands that are vaguely rocky and more like pop, then yeah, I think they're one of the best examples. Especially with um, yeah, yeah, just like the nice balance of everyone's role in the band, and not to mention there's an occasional other instrument like there's a there's a nice woodwind instrument that's used in Save a Prayer, which yeah, I really like that song and it helps make that one stand out. So yeah, they don't just stick to their normal instruments; they do occasionally experiment with other ones. And yeah, as you can see, I'm kind of running out of things to say, but yeah, just yeah, very cool band. Not to mention the music videos are fab as well. Yeah, very memorable ones that do well to create the imagery of these songs. And once again, I feel like the middle portion of the 80s is where that's at its strongest. You have some nice proper on-set filming, especially in Rio, because yeah, I feel like they generally went there, which yeah, really cool. So yeah, anyway, let's get going on to the next album. Okay, so the first and perhaps only proper montage album, like consisting of multiple artists. Fun fact: when I was thinking what my favourite albums were, I remember thinking a lot of albums that one of my parents has made. Yeah, just like his own custom album with, which also has like a variety of artists and songs, but obviously I can't really count them. They might be cool to share one day what they were like and how nostalgic I found them, but they're not mainstream, unlike all of these other albums, including this one. So yeah, this is the only Now album on the list. So yeah, would have been interesting to add the other Now albums I like. There's Now Movies, which helped introduce me to a lot of classic songs like Stand By Me, Brown Eyed Girl, and Footloose. Yeah, a lot of those really good ones. But in terms of the numbered ones, there's a lot of the teen ones that my parents used to own. I remember them being okay. Then we also own 77, 80, 83, and I personally also like 78, 79, 70, no, 81. Yeah, there was just of these albums do have their highlights. But yeah, the ones I mentioned, not only do I own, but I also just like the collection of the most as far as my memory goes. But why did I go for this one? And so this was released in the summer of 2012, where my primary school era was coming to a close, and a lot of what this album has just gives me a lot of memories of the end of primary school. Yeah, because of the songs that were coming out then, I was really liking. And yeah, because in 2011 and 2012, that's where um, there was just one song after another which I really liked. Granted, there were some that I like more than others. Yeah, what songs does this one have? It has We Are Young by Fun. Fun is a band that I really like and had a lot of potential, and whilst the lead singer still carried on his own, yeah, I'm still yet to see this band again in action. They might have done, and I haven't looked into it yet. But just after a collection of successful singles, only to be not there in 2013, that was a shame. And the same can be said with Lawson and Covered Drive, who also have their one of their songs played in this album, and they too kind of went after 2012, which was also a shame. Um, yeah, so if you're wondering, so it was Lawson's When She Was Mine, and then Covered Drives is Sparks, which, yeah, two of those are really nice. And then I really like Feel the Love by Rudimental and John Newman, my favourite song, well, one of them from both of those. Throwback Rider's Whistle, despite the rude context, I really like the summer vibe of that song. And it has Sing, where Gary Barlow worked with the Commonwealth Band. I really like the grand scale of that song. Um, yeah, what else is there? Yeah, just a collection of really good songs, and the ones I favour, I yeah, just have the most nostalgic for. Oh yeah, but it's just, yeah, the reason I went on that rant earlier is because, yeah, back then I was just listening to the charts, waiting to see what happens, just anticipating one song after another, and I just remember having the one song appealed to me one after the next, even from the start of that year until the end, because both 81 and 83 were also like really good with the selection of songs they have. So yeah, I think it is overall nostalgia, and I also like really the front cover as well. It's just during my school years and just seeing the advert come along with all of these colours, they look really nice. It definitely matches with the whole summer feel which this album has. So yeah, I think that's all I can say about this one. Because yeah, 2012 had this interesting vibe where um, it just kind of felt like, when I think of 2010 songs, I kind of, yeah, this is what I kind of picture and envision when it comes to, these 2012 albums. And the same can be said with 2010 and 2011. They send, with what they establish and what they managed to achieve, yeah, they really done their decade proud, I guess. Um, yeah, and despite being a varied album of artists, there's just like a nice consistent feel throughout. A lot of them just these nice normal pop songs. There's rap every now and again. There's a couple of instrumental pieces every now and again. There's these sort of proper instruments every now and again. But yeah, you don't have like proper rock songs or an Enya track, like a new age track. There's not really many of those. Yeah, I think that just goes to show how consistent this album feels. Despite going from one different track to the next. Um, so yeah, I think that's why I've gone for this the most. Yeah, like, there's other now albums which also have like a nice representation of what the summers were like for me back then, and also many others, and even albums like Now 80 and Now 83. Just like listening to them as the year is ending, which is 2010 and 2011. Yeah, it's just they just feel like a nice way to end the year, and even 83. Yeah, I was already talking about 83. Yeah, just a nice way to end 2012 and its run of music. If you're a big fan of 2012 music like I am, there's a artist on YouTube called Pop Danthology who did a remix of a majority of the 2012 songs back then, and a couple of 2011 that kind of carried over to 2012. But even then, when you like listen to that, yeah, I just yeah, it feels like a theme and an era of itself. 2012 with its music, yeah, just some really good stuff. Um, but anyway, that's the favourite now album for me, and let's go on to the new album, the next album. Alright, so started in the 80s and then later on in the 90s that made this gem of an album. This was 91, 92, and after creating successful songs like Listen to Your Heart and It Must Have Been Love, which were grand hits in the 80s, and then they managed to continue being rather good in the early 90s. And there's, I think, when you sometimes hit a new decade, a lot of artists tend to try and find out what the trends would have been like, and then they change their entire approach to music, which would get a new audience, but the old fans would be like, "Oh, I'm not sure about this new direction." And granted, if the rock set came from the late 80s and it's only the early 90s, I think that would have been more of a smooth transition. Because, for instance, 1979 has a lot of songs that sound like the 80s, especially when looking at albums like Abba's Voulez-Vous. So yeah, either way it could be said, but the point is that despite being the start of the 90s, where some dance music would have come about, Roxette continue to do what they do best. Great guitar work, synthesizer work, and the drum work is very good as well. And so, firstly, with this album, I think this is definitely another one of those albums where many favorites on this album. Some of them are some of my favorite songs ever. It was also one of the first albums I used to listen to when I was younger. So yeah, great album to be introduced to. But yeah, even despite a recent re-listen, there's a good portion of the songs I don't remember, but the ones I do, I still like. But like I said, I still have the favourites. So as implied by the title, their single Joyride, which I have heard being used a lot recently, like on the radio and that, which is rather good. I like it when songs which were once successful, continue to be played and, just are more deserving to be replayed. So yeah, that's really nice. Although there's a whole heap of other songs which are fab as well. There's Perfect Day, which is at the end of the album. Really nice ending to the album, by the way. Knocking on Every Door is I'll just say, I think that's like very snappy in its rocking approach, especially when the drums kind of take, like help lead that track, and then it's the synths that are coming much later, which makes this one interesting. Um, do you feel excited? What's it called? Do you get excited? Which is also near the end of the album. That one's like a really sweet tune. It sounds very similar to their 80s stuff. But my favorite track ever on this album, and not to mention one of my favorite tracks ever, is Fading Like a Flower, which oh yeah, that one's just brilliant because it starts off with a really nice soft piano, and then the way the guitars or the drums come in, and because of the notes chosen, it feels extremely sentimental and delicate. Yeah, just like a really nice, charming track, and it's the kind of feel which I don't really get from any other music. Like how many other songs could you listen to where you would think it's a a gentle track at first, only to be really powerful. And oh wow, yeah, I really like it. And yeah, and vocal wise, I do like the duo together. I don't quite remember their names, unfortunately. Um, but yeah, they are yeah, fab duo. I do like their vocals equally, and I think they both play guitars, and as far as I know, they both do the guitar work rather well. And for those who may or may not know, the female lead sadly died recently, but the bloke who he continues. He now calls Roxette PG Roxette or Roxette PG, and PG is his initials. So yeah, good for him to continue the legacy in some way. And yeah, I've listened to the new stuff, and it's rather good because they're definitely one of those artists who you know have maintained their identity across the years. The last album when the two of them were together, which was about 2013 or 14, it does have more pop elements, especially one song I like, which is called "It Just Happens." Yeah, it doesn't really have much guitar work, but I really like the synth stuff. They might like make it sound grand, and it has the delicacy that Faded Like a Flower has. And yeah, and thanks to the sometimes when you're looking at an album cover, it kind of helps you give a vision when listening to the music. And I think, yeah, I would describe the music as quite colourful across. And yeah, once again, most of the songs stand out. I think these songs are a bit more similar to one another compared to other albums where they have far different approaches. Which does make them more distinct. But in this case, there is definitely more of a focus on the style they are continuing and newly established there. Well, not newly, but would have been new back then. And yeah, they still do that rather well. Um, yeah, so yeah, definitely will always be one of my favourite childhood albums. And yeah, it's just some really cool, well done stuff. And yeah, I think that's all I can say for that one. Yeah, but I do recommend this one. Yeah, I think this is some of the best rock stuff in the 90s, especially the early 90s, I would say. Um, yeah, we're about to get on to the top five, which is quite exciting. So yeah, let's see what the other albums are like. So this is a really interesting choice because this feels like an album that's almost from the modern era. Because when like looking at the rest of this list, there are yeah, the other common ones. Some of them um, are released far later, but they feel like music that somewhat comes from the past. You'll see what I mean when I get to there. But yeah, this was a 2008 or 9 album, and yeah, and it does share many qualities to what today's music sounds like, but in a good way, of course. So yeah, so why this album? So firstly, this album, the second album, which is The Fame Monster, then the third album, which is Born This Way. Really like those a lot. Although I would go for this album in particular because this is definitely one of those cases where I definitely like all the songs almost equally. And the reason I say almost is because there are some favourites to pick out. And not gonna lie, a lot of my favourite tunes from this album and also across her career, most of them are the album tracks. And whilst I do really like the singles, there are a couple of album tracks which have a bit more weight to them, are a bit more emotional, and also sound sweeter as well. So to list a few examples, I think my all-time favourite is Summer Boy. I really like that one because it's quite rocky, and there's also Again and Again, which is also rocky as well. Although Summer Boy kind of feels like a night tune with minor electronic elements, but Again and Again sounds like a song that you would make in your garage, but just like a very obviously I say that in a good way, and and there's a lot of really nice piano work in some cases, like Paper Gangster and Brown Eyes, and Brown Eyes you might have heard of. So one example I can think of where that song was played, for those in the UK who may or may have not watched the older run of Water Road, there was one of Brown Eyes. It's played when the characters Bolton and Sambuca give each other a look from far away. It's in one of the last episodes of season 5, but I just remember thinking, oh, that's an album track. Fancy that song playing. And not to mention, when I last looked, this was one of those albums where it did have its main singles even released before, but then her or other people, just decide to go for other songs to then make as the focus singles or the focus song. And yeah, something I've learned recently is that a focus song or focus album, it means that once the main singles are out the way, it's then deciding which album track is to be made the next single, and that not always a music video for it. That's one thing, but I think it tends to be either a choice from those who made the song, or they choose it based on the popularity. As far as I know, nothing else I can say might have been one of the focus tracks. Beautiful Dirty Rich, I think, was another one. I swear that had a music video. Brown Eyes could have been, considering what I mentioned earlier. But yeah, just quite a lot. And I think, like most albums do, they will play this main singles and then the rest. And yeah, this is definitely the case of this album. It had the first four tracks are the singles, which is Just Dance, Love Game, Paparazzi, and then Poker Face. And yes, this is definitely an album which I think I know back to front of. That's how much I played it. Yeah, I really like this album since release, and it can be said with the following two. And if you're wondering, I do like her song from Maverick, and I've need to listen to A Star Is Born again with that song. But the main track I like with Bradley Cooper. The Applause album, which is the fourth one, there are bits I like from it. I would say my favourite track, and I would argue also the best track on the album, is Gypsy, because that carries over her approach to making a deeper song of weight and a bit of emotion. Because like I said, she does either of these dance tracks or the emotional tracks rather well, and her first four singles are definitely, is the dancing side of her. And and it's still rather good, especially the note choices, some cool electronic elements, and yeah, vocal work is also rather good because, as well as being a generally good vocalist, she's able to adapt to a voice based on the music she plays. Like, for instance, in the pre-chorus of Love Game, she's able to make her voice like very snappy alongside like the beat of the track. It kind of reminds me of Michael Jackson almost. And yeah, once again, very good mixture of electronic and acoustic elements. I like the piano work. There's guitar every now and again. There are some songs which have a timeless feel, like Nothing Else I Can Say. I really like that one. It has a very memorable synth rhythm, and I feel like it's played on the synth because of the way it's played. And not to mention, there are elements where she get hold of other people. There's one artist who makes a quick cameo in Just Dance. I kind of forgot his name, and I swear he helped Lady Gaga during these first three albums, and I think it's because of him for why those three albums are quite masterful regarding modern music. I swear it's him. Anyway, and there's another song called Starstruck where she manages to get hold of both Flow Rider and Space Cowboy rapping at the same time. And for those who are probably a fan of them, to have them both together up alongside each other, I think that's rather cool for those who like them. This style here, like with the album cover, and that definitely matches, because a lot of these songs you can play during like night time and it would sound really nice. And the same could be with the following albums, because the Fame Monster, I think, adds a bit more dubstep elements, which also sound cool, and then Born This Way are just more of a grunge rock feel, which yeah, each of them are rather cool. But all of those three albums definitely have a consistent feel with the use of vocals, a balance between dance and emotional tracks, or quick or slow tracks. Um, Also, either happy or sad tracks, because you know sometimes artists are more they can either work with grand tracks or prefer to sing more sad tracks. But you know, artists like Lady Gaga here, you know, is able to do like multiple types of emotion depending on the song. And yeah, I think yeah, it's just really well done stuff. So yeah, if you've missed out on any of their work, I definitely would recommend it. So yeah, just well done album. I like the size of it as well. Because I'm not the biggest fan of albums being too short, which is one of my only problems with her second album, that only has 8 tracks. But both this one and the third one have nearly 20, which yeah, just feels more like a full package or like a full meal, you could say. Um, yeah, and I think yeah, she's my favorite female artist. Yeah, I think so. I have if yeah, well, I think regarding solo female artists, yeah, I think yeah, she's yeah, definitely fills the top slot with that. So yeah, very good pop album despite how old it is. And yeah, then let's continue with the top 5. And possibly one of the most underrated bands ever. It comes to a point where I've been hearing 3 of their overall hits on the radio and nothing much else, and it's a real shame because I grew up with a majority of these albums even before I knew what the artist was or the songs. I was just listening to all of them, just like a good majority of their albums, and just being wowed by it. And once I decided to go in depth into them back in 2013, 2014, I was like, oh, it's this song and this song. So they have so a lot of this band stuff has a lot of memories for me. Like I said, even before I knew where the songs were coming from. But after listening to the entire discography, yeah, they're definitely another favourite band of mine. So yeah, Erasure is made up of lead singer Andy Bell and then Vince Clarke, who did all the instruments that you will be hearing throughout this album. And I guess there might be other people involved as well. I know there's a backing singers, but yeah, I don't really know who else does the instruments alongside Vince Clarke. But Vince Clarke is definitely the head of that, especially as Erasure has always continued using the use of synthesizers, even from the get-go. And also before then, Vince Clarke has been part of bands like Depeche Mode, Yazoo, and Assembly before sticking to Erasure, and they're continuing as a duo to this day, which is really good of them, especially considering their latest album called The Neon, or was it just called Neon, which is an album I like, but I do have my favourites. So in order, I really like The Circus That Has Sometimes, in which was one of the best singles, definitely a song that plays on the radio a lot. So successful, it stayed at number 2 for a while in 1986. And then I also really like I Say, that's another album back in 94, that one's fab. And then there was the self-titled album in 95, that one's really charming. And then in the modern era, they've done ones like Love Boat and Like the End of the World and Nightbird. All of those are like really cool. They're the kind of songs where you can somewhat tell they're from the 80s and they sound like they have aged, but they just somehow fit at the same time. And yeah, just to manage to achieve that, yeah, it's rather good stuff because you could have easily gone through into a path where they do continue all the synth stuff, and then people are like, oh no, I feel they kind of belong in the 80s, but no, that's not the case here. They do make sure they update themselves over time. But not only that, they, like each of their albums are quite distinct from one another. And yeah, I also forgot the album chorus. That one was also a pretty good one, an early 90s one. But yes, so this album right here is The Innocence, which, despite the albums I mentioned, all of those are fab. But yeah, The Innocence gets me the most because, as I've said, I rank these albums by how much I like the tracks and how many of the tracks I like. But unlike the other albums, this album I definitely like pretty much every single track. However, there is one track called 65,000, which is, I think it's not only a cover, but it's instrument, an instrumental track, which I don't think really fits with the rest of the album, or at least it's not as well as the other songs. And they've also covered River Deep Mountain High, which it's a really good cover, but not gonna lie, I would yeah, I think that's like my latter half of the ranking. But yeah, going for the singles first, it also has Little Respect, which is pretty much their signature tune at the moment. Yeah, really good song. I just wish that more of their singles and album songs were um, famous as well, because you have bands like the Beatles where people are like, well, I know the singles, but no, some of the album tracks as well. I really wish that's the case where Rage are like, oh my god, their stuff is really good. And yeah, so back to singles, so it has a Little Respect, Ship of Fools, Chains of Love. Yeah, some really good singles that did help define the latter half of the 80s. And yeah, I really like the the album tracks as well. You have ones like Phantom Bride and Hollow Ground, which are a bit more darker and echoey, and then you have ones like Yahoo and Way to the World, which are a bit more jovial. And really, another really interesting thing about this album is that as these Erasure albums are very distinct, this one almost has a bit of a fantasy theme to them. No, they sound like pop songs I don't know, because you can't really listen to an Erasure track as you watch a fairy tale film. Like, I think that would be a very hard mix to do, but it just feels like yeah, it just feels like very fantasy like to me. I think that's the way I can describe it, and not to mention what the front cover looks like. It just feels very is historical the right word? But it doesn't sound like it's medieval either. But yeah, it just feels like stuff you would hear in a fancy, colourful world that only has a couple of darker areas. Because, like I said, this does have gloomier tracks, and but yeah, it's just and also like some of the song titles they mention things like "The Ship of Fools" and "The Witch in the Ditch," and even the song Carter's Stone kind of sounds fantasy like, and not gonna lie, that sounds a bit like a beach tune. So it's very adventurous as well. That's what makes this album not only stand out in Erasure's whole catalogue, but it just just like music in general. And what was I gonna say? I think oh yeah, I got it. Yeah, I think this might be Erasure's best-selling album because of having a little respect on. I could be wrong, but I can see that making sense. And yeah, it's well deserved because yeah, like listening to the whole album, it's great. And I also really like albums that have a lot of tunes on, and this one has about 17 or 18, which is yeah, just enough for me. And yeah, I think one more track which is worth mentioning. It's called "When I Needed You," which is really nice. It starts off nice and gentle, and it's like one of those tracks where it kind of grasps your childhood, and it just talks. The song talks about, when I was younger, but look where I am now. It's a very emotional piece, and another thing about Andy Bell is that I just can't believe he's not mentioned more, because he's like one of these artists who's not only has some really good general vocals, but he's able to go low effortlessly, and he's able to reach really high notes as well. But When I Need You has it has some good showcasing of his lower vocals. Like later on, they sound really nice. And just a wide range of um, vocal bits and bobs that is showcased across his album, like A Letter of Respect and just the other singles. They already show off his talent quite well, but on the rest of the songs, he's able to have a nice vocal range where he makes happy songs happier and sad songs even sadder. Like he's that diverse. He's extremely good. I think that's what I can say. I've been thinking about doing like expanding more about Erasure, especially how underrated they are, because I think the most mainstream thing that's happened is that I remember Andy Bell appearing on Let Me Hear Your Voice or something, that game show in the UK. But aside from that, it's just they're not a band that are seen as much, and they've done a couple of successful things. That people are like, oh yeah, I probably heard of them and know about this, and this. But honestly, they need a much bigger spotlight. So not only do I recommend this album, but I just uh, you could even just have a go with like the rest of their albums. If not, go for the other ones I mentioned as well. Here it's some really good stuff. They're definitely one of those 80s bands that adapt with the times and continue going and carrying on experimenting. They're really a very fab duo. And probably some of my are they my favorite? Yep. I think they are definitely my favorite music duo. So anyway, let's get into the top three. So a long time ago, this would have been an album that would have been number one, but later on in the years, as in the next two albums come after 2013, like way after 2013 when I first got into them. Actually, no, it could have been 2014 actually. 2013 was Delta Machine, which was one of their albums, and as you probably may have guessed, I'm definitely a big fan of this band. Yeah, definitely one of my top five bands. Not only is the kind of music they create very inspiring stuff, but they're definitely a band where I like the most songs of. I think it's above 50, as far as I can remember. And they've continued to make work, and a lot of it's just very varied. But why this album? And also interestingly enough, like is with now 82 being a varied collection of artists, and then you have a couple of other greatest hits albums. And I think I would, I think there is definitely a difference between a greatest hits album and a normal album, but I think I will still, I am already counting these greatest hits albums because, I think it just showcases the artist rather well, especially if the amount of stuff is limited at the time. So the Bengals album we covered earlier, that was a nice suitable greatest hits album because they didn't really continue after that album as far as I know. But the Depeche Mode album, and yes, it does have another look that's orange and yellow, which is visually similar to what hits from 86 to 98 looks like. But this is the version I have, and I think it really misses the song Photographic, which is in the new version of this album, which, I really like that song, by the way. But it is just this particular version to which, if it wasn't for this particular album, I probably wouldn't have been into Depeche Mode as much as I did. I was just listening to it one day in the car journey, and I was just wowed by it. And I think I would have catched it much later, but I think discovering them back then, I think it was a good time, to encounter a band like this, and also as this was a tad later on after, uh, 2010, 11, and 12. This was definitely a good album and artist to get into, especially as the charts weren't really appealing to me back then. But yeah, so 81 to 85, what is this album like? So the Depeche Mode are definitely a kind of band who already from the get-go are quite experimental and they like to vary. The first two albums are quite similar, and also the third and fourth album is kind of similar, but then after that they've done all sorts from darker material, more serious themes, more use of rock, even gospel in the mid 90s with their album songs of Faith and Devotion, which is another album of theirs. That kind of material is in the following album, which is 86 to 98, that album. But yeah, with this one, it is like a very 80s album because at first it were three men on a synthesizer with drums on tape, which is pretty much an equivalent of digital drums, which was rather interesting. And then later on, they start experimenting with, even with the use of metal clanging and use of other instruments. And yeah, they carry on using synthesizers, but just in varied ways. And but yeah, I'm not gonna lie, I do really like Depeche Mode during these early years. I think there are different types of fans, like there are those who know the normal hits in general. There's some who like them during the 90s where they were possibly more successful, especially with the album Violator. Some probably still like them in the modern era with the new albums and the way they tour at the moment. And yeah, all of those eras for Depeche Mode are definitely fab. But for me, the earlier stuff kind of grabs me more, especially when I rank these songs. A good portion of them would have come from the just right throughout the 80s in general, and I guess more precise, the first half of the 80s. But yeah, a lot of favourite songs. I really like New Life and See You, Meaning of Love, Everything Counts, People Are People, Shake the Disease. Yeah, these were just some of my favourite songs when I was started to become a teenager. Like really interesting music to get into when you first started to become a teenager. It just makes you wonder like what kind of music would have been into. If I was a bit more trendier, but as you can tell, I'm a bit more varied and old school sometimes. But yeah, so I think like of some other albums I like, especially from this list, I just really like the progression. But as a greatest hits album, it's a kind of progression to see what they were like over the years, starting off as proper synth material from the 80s, and then they started to find a bit more of their unique voice, like Everything Counts, People Are People. Those are songs which I haven't really found similarities of to other songs. Granted, I can think of a couple, not right now, but you would definitely tell from the stuff from 81 and 82, they would definitely sound like Human League, Erasure, all of those synthesizer users. And yeah, and I really like all of their contributions as well. For those who may or may not know, yeah, Vince, I think I mentioned it earlier, but not gonna lie, I recorded this out of order. But yeah, Vince Clarke, who now is in Erasure and also used to be in a Who, one of his early career steps was being part of Depeche Mode in 1981. Then he left shortly after, and then that's where Alan Wilder came in. Alan Wilder, yep, sorry, I'll say that properly. Started doing that, by the way. And the three of them were the founder members. So there's Dave Garn, Martin Gore, and that is Andy Fletcher. Yep. Wow, I still remember all of their names. But yeah, I really like their contributions, like a proper role each of them have. Like Dave was always the one with the vocals, Martin was famous with, or famous for, using the guitar and occasional vocals. Very nice vocals actually. And yeah, it doesn't use any guitar material at this point, but later on, yeah, it's quite impressive. And Andy back then, he was more of the bass synthesizer person, and then later on, he just kind of stuck with the keyboard, which, yeah, he's done a lot of impressive stuff. And even Alan Wilder before, I think he went onto the drums in the 90s. But yeah, he does act as another core synthesizer user rather. And but yeah, just yeah, these three blokes there, yeah, they just managed to generate all sorts. It's not just the synthesizers back then; they're just all incorporating all sorts of sounds. And until Vince Clarke left, it had to be Martin Gore, who was one of the lead writers of the lyrics and the music, and yeah, just like one of the main writers. And yeah, knowing that he's written what most of this album has, it's just pretty impressive. Yeah, he's definitely one of my favourite musicians. And I used to listen to a lot of these instrumentals, like just the songs on their own without the vocals. And yeah, it's some really impressive stuff. And yeah, I think this is one of my, I guess, my favorite 80s album. Yeah, absolutely. Considering what later on the list looks like. Um, so yeah, I think that's all I can think of. So yeah, definitely one of my favorite bands. I like this era. I like the hits so far. Yeah, these instruments is fab. I've played a lot of these songs to death, and yeah, and this album has helped me not only get into this band, but I think it just further encouraged me to keep listening to new stuff. And I was more in action in certain new stuff in 2016, 2017. I was just taking like small steps into finding new stuff to get into, but not gonna lie, I kind of wish I was listening to more artists, because once I found Depeche Mode and the others, I kind of just stuck with them instead of continuing to branch on. But at least I did eventually, and it just goes to show that bands like these were so good at a point where they were just worth like the focus and attention and the repeated listening, or just carry on listening, to more of these songs over time. So yeah, I think that's all I can say with it. Yeah, definitely good album. Definitely, as a greatest hits album, you'll definitely be liking one of these songs. One or two of them will surprise you. One or two you'll definitely hear of as well. Because I guess something else worth mentioning is that whilst a lot of artists tend to on live concerts, they try and perform a majority of what the entire career is like. But with Depeche Mode, because of how modern or in the trends they are, it means that a lot of their stuff from these 5 years, they haven't really performed much recently. If anything, I remember I've actually listened to Everything Counts live in 2017. That was a surprise, and I think they do just can't get enough recently, which is also in this album as well. Great track. But yeah, just a lot of these songs from 82 and Shake the Disease from 85. Yeah, they don't really play those live anymore, which I'm a bit sort of sad about, especially for see what the entire live experiences has been like. But you can sort of see why I can't really. Yeah, you have to be selective, especially with what fits now and what your current image looks like. And yeah, I think that would just be tricky to do. But if they manage to do Just Can't Get Enough and Everything Counts, I think it would be really interesting to see what they can do with if they're playing any of their songs again. But anyway, that's just a thought of mine. Yeah, great band in that. And let's move on to the next two albums, which, despite how good this album is, the following two have a bit more of an emotional punch for me. And here in the number one spot, I know it was a big question for what I think is my favourite album, but I think it's also objectively one of the best albums ever. like goodness gracious me, where to start with this album. So yeah, firstly, you didn't would have never expect to see ABBA come back in 40 years. You know, at the one point there seemed like these artists who, despite having a really good amount of hits in the past and continue doing their own stuff in the future, even though if it's not, well, sadly not as popular as what they did when they were all together. And then they've had throw this surprise at us, and oh my god, it more than paid off. Because when I was listening to the first two singles that were not only released before the album, but there was the idea of just making those songs, and then they decided to make a whole album. And oh my god, it's one of the best decisions they have ever made, and a really good way of rebranding this band alongside the virtual concert, which I've seen once, and even though it's not like your everyday average concert, but yeah, the experience is amazing. If you have not gone to the Void concert, I definitely would recommend you doing so, because it is an experience which is like no other. Even if you're not an ABBA fan, there's surely one or two songs you might like, because not every song that's played in Voyage are singles, and you might like that, and well, like a part of it at least, and appreciate them more. And I'll tell you what, after one of the album singles alongside their concert, it just made me like them at a point where I really like all of them songs, because beforehand I only liked a good few. I only have a few favourites, and granted, I do have um, still have my favourites, but I just like a lot of the other songs way more, even at a point where I've been listening to every song off from this band and still really enjoy it. And yeah, so on to the album itself. So firstly, I guess it's in the air of whether this is the last album or not. But regardless, it's a really good culmination of their work. Not only what have they done before together, but it also ties into what they used to do with their solo work. Like for instance, Benny Anderson, who's the pianist, he's been doing orchestral stuff with his Benny Anderson Orchestra, who've also done some really nice stuff. And I think some of their members have come along to do some of the orchestral material for this album. Yeah, I'm not sure if any members of Benny's orchestra came about here. I think a couple of people I've heard got involved because with the whole orchestral stuff. But regardless, in yeah, it's just the like you might have heard the likes of strings in past album songs, but in this album it's way more prominent, and it makes this particular album stand out. It makes it a lot more grand, which not only makes this album very distinctive for what ABBA have done, compared to what they've done before, but for a album in the early 2010s, this just like really stands out. Like what other album has been done recently that mixtures an orchestra with a wide range of pop songs. And but yeah, speaking of these songs, it's an album that sounds like it comes from the past, whilst also sound like it come. It's like just almost. Oh, I don't know how to describe it. It's like you could imagine some of these songs being released in the 70s or 80s, but they somehow work when listening to them today. But I think at the same time, I think every ABBA song has a very nice timeless feel to it, and I believe that some of the best songs are ones that sound timeless. And yeah, I think that's what ABBA and also other bands managed to achieve quite well. And yeah, I remember thinking of doing a breakdown video of this, but I feel like I might be repeating some of the same points that other people have done, and it's the same goes for a video talk. Like not only talking about the songs I like, but also ranking them. It's an idea that I may or may not do. I think I just need to put more thought to it, and also make sure that I can make my point stand out from what everyone else has said. Um, But yeah, so I do like every song in this album, of course. There are three of them which I don't like as much. Well, just simply because the other songs of this album achieve more and grab me more. But even then, every song, stands out. Proper strong. With its theming and all the instrumentation, and um, yeah, and also just going back to what the album, the whole album being a combination of what they achieved before. Because like I said, I talked about all the orchestral stuff, and it's been done before, but then it's gone from on to 100 in this album. Really prominent stuff. You have songs like "When You Dance with Me," which sounds a bit like some of their earlier stuff. Um, you just accuse, almost has like an acoustic feel to it rather. And then you have Keep an Eye on Dan, which sounds like more of an 80s song. There's Just an Ocean, which, sounds similar, quite similar to Why Does It Have to Be Me? But Just an Ocean, for those who might not know, is actually a song that was originally written during the Relay V era, but the band discontinued with the track, and then they decided to go back to it for this album. And yeah, really good of them to do so, because yeah, it just makes that particular track complete. And then there's "I Can Be That Woman," that sounds similar to Agnetta's solo work. Yeah, slow, strong songs which sound similar to a lot of the solo work. And then "Bumblebee," no doubt about it, has similarities to what Frida used to do in the past. And by the way, yeah, Agneta and Frida, they're the women sing the women singing, for those who do not know, well, just aren't as familiar with uh, uh, as familiar as ABBA as much as me and others are. Yeah, sorry, I've got a machine going on in the background. Sorry about that. Um, so yeah, what else to say? I really like the front cover as well. Normally they do albums which feature them on, and funny enough, I remember a funny analysis where if you go through all of their main albums, the band members are more prominent first, and then they become, they just slowly go smaller and smaller up until a point where you don't see any of the band members at all in this album. But even then, I still really like it. You would never think Orange and Black go as well together like this, but yeah, it's really nice. Whenever I think of, Black and Orange, and even White with the title and the lens flare there, it really creates a warm, out of this world feeling. Because yeah, normally, when it comes to visual stuff, it doesn't really always add to the quality of the music it's represented. But I think if the visuals, or whether it's an album cover or music video, if it does that really well, then yeah, it is worth explaining. Because yeah, like when I listen to these songs, I can just picture the imagery in front of me right here. And yeah, and yeah, it's just like all of the other instruments do really well as well. Because not only the orchestral stuff, which I'm not really the biggest fan of orchestras, with a collection of violins and cellos. There's a lot of songs which have them in there, but I'm more of a kind of person where I like drums, guitar, and a keyboard, just like a normal rock band. But this album does have that premise, but just with an orchestra back behind it to really add to the strength of a lot of the music. The piano and the synthesizer work are, proper stars in this album. I really like them. But yeah, not to mention the vocal work as well. These are songs sung by 70-year-old ladies, and yeah, they do really well. They do achieve a lot of aspects in the vocals, whether it's a need for longer vocals or like gentler ones. They do that really well. And another thing I really like ABBA is that they the instrumental managed to go in and manage to parallel well with the vocals, whether it's like the speed of the vocals or they sound very alike the vocals. And yeah, they do that really well. And as you probably said, I'm not like the most enthusiastic about lyrics, because I sometimes well, no, I just often misunderstand lyrics, and sometimes when I try and look into them, I do struggle to understand it, whilst also getting some idea of a track. But in this case, when listening to this album, the lyrics are complex, but they have a lot of simplicity at a point where I do understand the point of each of them, and the rest can be said with their other ABBA stuff as well. But with this one, it just feels a lot more like an entity of itself. And I think because we feel like ABBA takes the extra mile, and for example, in one of my favourite songs of this album, which is "Don't Shut Me Down," they do this really clever thing where not only do the keys like keep progressing and the song also continuing to build up until it ends. There's also this really interesting thing where the notes manage to go between major and minor each line, even going from positive lyrics with minor keys to then a sad line of lyrics with a major key, because normally major is happy and minor is sad, but they um, paralleling or just going in line with lyrics which would have sound the opposite, but it's just the way it like flips in and out of that. Just really really interesting. It's just there's a lot more thought into these songs, because of examples like that. And all of these songs they get a decent amount of views and that. But honestly, I think my generation needs to listen to this album, like, because I think a lot of people in my generation be like, oh, just a load of old people, creating this music. It's the music my parents like. But yet again, there's a lot of older artists which a lot of my generation like. I can think of a couple who are about 40 and 50. So if you like them, then might as well give them ABBA a chance. And there's a very likely chance you'll be enjoying a song, just like at least one of the songs from this album. And so yeah, oh yeah. Have you done the sync? Thank you. So I don't have my normal recording location. Sorry if you heard that. Um, so yeah, I think that's all I can say for this one. So despite because there's other albums where I've liked the entire like the full package like all the way at a point where I like rank all of the songs 8 out of 10, which I think that's something I can say for the past albums. But with these ones, the songs I like are so good. They're just all of them are all of my favourites on this song are in my top 30 or 20. And even if the songs I don't like as much, I still like them loads because of what it's a part of and what they achieve and the style they managed to get through. And it's also worth mentioning that this album also pays attention to detail from what song comes after another. Like for instance, going back to Don't Shut Me Down, the song before is Little Things, where it ends on a D note and it has children singing, but then Don't Shut Me Down starts on a D note and it also refers to children. I just remember thinking, oh wow, that's a really nice way to connect from one song to the next. So there's a natural um, um, more like a proper through line of this album. And even the whole album, it's all about connections with people, because when going through the album, it talks about getting back with someone or breaking up with someone or being nostalgic with someone or caring about the environment. This album has a selection of themes which it explores like really well. It's like a masterpiece film, just having its own themes representing it really well. So yeah, I think that's all I can think of, and yeah, this pretty much takes it to the end of this video. So I hope you enjoy this video. I know these videos are a bit lower in production, but I just think my thoughts and the kind of music that I've encountered and discovered are worth sharing, and all of these albums I've mentioned, yeah, all of them are definitely worth listening to. Yeah, especially this one. This one's the album I recommend the most. So yeah, without further ado, yeah, I'll just end the video now before I accidentally bore you. So yeah, hope you have a good day. Hope you enjoy this video. Hope you like the albums from this list, and so yeah, see ya.